this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. The stories I've heard. Families that would come to me in the wake of a death investigation, and they would say they had so much to live for, or that next week he was starting a new job and he was robbed of his life by this other person. The idea that someone had prepared their entire life to continue to live a better life, perhaps, seemingly grateful for every second that they have on this earth, every breath that they take into their lungs. So many of those bodies, over so many years from me, I stood over and thought, what if? What if they had survived? Car accidents, homicides, natural disease, where cancer robs you of everything. But, on the flip side of that, I've recently discovered there are a group of people that kind of put a fine point on a concept that is old as time. The idea that you live in a vacuum and that nothing matters. I think they call it, the past century, they call it nihilism. At the end of the day, it's pure selfishness. Today, we're going to have a discussion about arguably one of the most bizarre cases we've come across in some time. We're going to talk about the idea, and let this sink in, of anti-natalism. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, look, back in January, I got to tell you, and you were there for my family. You were there for, supporting my wife and me through prayers and just asking, is there anything else I can do? And I remember laying in a hospital bed in Birmingham, Alabama, hoping that I would breathe air again that was outside of that institution. Because I got to tell you, there were some dark moments, brother. I really felt like I was going to die. And I remember clutching on to every thread of opportunity I had. And, you're so drugged out, with post-surgical stuff and everything. And you don't really know, you're in this kind of twilight zone. But the one thing I knew is that I wanted to get out of that hospital bed. I wanted to be able to hug my grandbabies, hug my kids, love my wife, sit here. And one of the greatest things I do right now at this point in my life is sit here several times a week with the man that I consider to be one of the best friends I've ever had, Dave Mack, and just talk.
Yeah.
And just talk. We're not staring at phones. We're just having conversations. And I remember how precious life seemed to me at that period of time. And I don't know, I come across cases like we're going to delve in today. Mm-hmm. And it's like somebody wadding up a piece of used notebook paper and throwing it in the trash pail. I'm shocked by it. I'm absolutely shocked.
I will tell you, when, we didn't talk a lot about you being sick because, to be honest with you, friends, we didn't know what was going on and what was going to happen. It went from being something that we thought was one thing and ended up being 1,000 times worse and had been misdiagnosed with you. And that's why it was shocking for all of us. I know I speak for everyone because they called me and talked to me and texted me, and I would tell you and Kim, I would tell Kim more than you because you were out of it. But I was like, y'all, please understand, the people in our world that we do business with are not asking about business. They're saying, what can we do for you? I mean, it was really nice to see that the people you believe are your friends and people who care about you as an individual actually do. And seeing that side of everyone, I was like, all right, now we got that part. Let's get this. What can we do? And there was so nothing. It was just the craziest part of prayer. That, granted, for those who are believers, prayer is everything. And we oftentimes say it's the only thing you can do. And it's like, well, it is the most powerful thing you can do. There is nothing, you cannot lift that rock and change anything. But we're dealing with people now, Joe, that you and I both have over the last several months have thought, where did they come up with this idea that, okay, you were, and now it's a movement of sorts that my mom and dad are to blame for me being born. I never asked to be born. And it's an actual thing. I mean, as a punchline to a joke, I get it. But seriousness in life, when you start labeling yourself, I am a strict vegan and natalist, and I have to look up this stuff and go, what did you make up today? What are you? And my thing is, my heart hurts for people who really feel like this, Joe, because I'm thinking, how do you get up out of bed? How do you approach life when to be honest with you, why are you a vegan if you didn't even want to be born? I mean, why are you worrying about what you're eating?
I mean, people that choose to be vegan, I think that they go that route because they think they're being healthy.
Yes.
And so it seems those two things seem to cancel out if you're so, down in the mouth over the fact that you're currently in existence.
Right.
And that you had no control over that decision. The two things don't seem they can't occupy. It's like Isaac Newton. These two things can't occupy the same space.
Right.
And so you think about this. Where does your mind work? And I think that it does work. It's just, and listen, this is for many years we worked cases based on a book called Final Exit. You and I are going to do an entire episode on Final Exit because it's mind-blowing. And Final Exit is something that kind of grew out of a movement back in the 80s. A guy named Derek Humphrey wrote a book called Final Exit. And there was another book, too, that he wrote prior to that. But he talked about they don't refer to it as suicide. It's referred to as self-deliverance. And he talked about aiding his wife.
Self-deliverance.
Yes, self-deliverance. Aiding his wife in her journey into the unknown. Look, she had terminal bone cancer, which is one of the most painful things you can go through. But from that sprung this idea of what they term as self-deliverance. And, and it's you think about it, and I think in your rational mind, you think you don't want somebody to suffer, and watch them have the dwindles. All right. But then it expanded out to, you've got people now that are saying, and had for a while, and I guess it still exists, they're suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. So they use that as a rationalization to go to their families and say, I want to end my life. I have chronic fatigue syndrome. You don't understand. I'm always tired. And so there's a recipe for it because Humphrey wrote this book called Final Exit. So you had this kind of underlying current that kind of developed relative to this. And the reason I've got this kind of rambling preamble here is the fact that this is kind of a culmination in what I saw developing back in the 80s as a death investigator. Because now we jump from self-deliverance as a result of being in extreme pain, which, I can't really judge anybody because, thank the good Lord, I haven't had to go through bone cancer. I don't know what that's like. But then I have this pop onto our radar where you have people rationalizing the end of their life because they didn't ask to be born. And so it was just, it's one of these things that's so super bizarre to me. And here's the other thing. When Final Exit came up, there were I had colleagues all over the country at medical examiners and coroner's offices that were catching these cases. And the reason we knew that they were these, first off, there would be a copy of the book at the house. And secondly, they had actually stuck to the recipe that this author had recommended. And there were multiple methodologies for painless death.
Oh, good grief.
And look, YouTube had to take all this stuff down. These things were being demonstrated on YouTube.
Wow. Is this when the Kevorkian thing was really getting big?
It kind of paralleled that period of time.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it it was one of these weird times to be a death investigator. And look, we're all about evidence and what we're looking for at the scene. And there were certain signs that you would look for if you had a suicide and you're thinking that, okay, is this a final exit? That was one of the questions we'd always ask ourselves. Is this a final exit case? As opposed to some other methodology, because suicide is as old as time as well. I mean, people have taken their lives for ages and ages and ages, but there's a recipe that was applied. My thought is, because we saw the widespread use of this, Dave, and this terrifies me, brother, this idea of anti-natalism, I'm wondering if this thing is going to go viral. And the culture that we live in now, with social media and how people get knocked around on social media a lot. And we live these, there's the old quote about the Brits, living lives of quiet desperation, where people are so isolated by these damn phones and they're living in their own world. And it does. I can only imagine it must seem very hopeless many times, but I hope that this is not going to be, this isn't a precursor to something much more sinister than just the cases we're going to talk about today.
Today, Sophie Tinney, 27 years old, is living with a guy named Lars Nelson. And they're living in Washington, state of Washington, on an island called Fox Island. And 6:30 on a Sunday morning, Lars Nelson calls 911 and says, I have a gunshot wound. He's fairly calm, sounds a little nervous, but he reports it as a suicide. And that's where this all begins, with the so-called suicide. I say so-called because the reason we're doing this story, Lars Nelson has been arrested and charged in the murder of Sophie Tinney. Sophie Tinney was very active in the movement that Joe was just talking about, and believed that the words are failing me, but she believed that there's so much pain in life, desperation and things like that, that to foist that onto some person by having them born was just unforgivable.
Immoral. I think, and that's the adjustment you have to, because I don't know. I'm not a philosopher. Is this circular logic? I don't understand, because they are anti-moralist, but yet they have an established set of morals, because this is a moral violation based upon the fact that they had no choice in being born. Please understand this. You had no choice in being born. And so it's that underlying thesis that is being used as a rationale to literally, Dave, and correct me if I'm wrong, the story I'm hearing is that she had asked that her life be taken from her.
And that's actually going to be the investigation. That's actually, Joe, right where we are. The reason we're doing this story, other than it appears to be a staged suicide, other than that, which you're going to have to, you got some explaining to do, Joseph, because
okay. All right.
But in reality, according to what we are hearing about the victim, Sophie Tinney, that she had a lot of power over her boyfriend, Lars Nelson. And according to her family members, that she could pretty much get him to do whatever. And that based on some things, because believe it or not, this is also tied to a bombing that took place a month after her death. So we're going to have to tie all this together. And I really wish we had Bethany or Karen, one of our psychs, or Angela Arnold.
What is it that Nancy always says? I need a psychiatrist.
Yeah, I need a shrink.
Yeah. And, you kind of feel like this. But what it comes down to, and always keep this in the forefront of your mind relative to our content here on Body Bags, is aside from all of the emotional stuff, aside from all of the hyperbole, what in fact does the science tell us? Our old friend, the Finder, Dave. We've talked about the Finder, and we repeat it over and over again. I got to tell you, one thing I do not like, and sometimes you don't have any choice in it, and most of the time you don't, is that when you roll up on the scene and I've got a Finder or a civilian that's out at the scene, and they look at me and they tell me they committed suicide. This is a suicide. Well, I guess part of me as an investigator from a practicality standpoint likes it when they tell me that, because it automatically deflects me to go down another road, or changes the course of my investigation. Because if you're telling me from the beginning that you believe, as the finder of this individual, that this is a suicide, I'm going to have further questions. And again, we have to keep in mind, Dave, the idea that in this principle, and I'll keep hammering this home as long as they allow me to do the show. Every death is a homicide until we prove otherwise.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I never thought about that, Joe. I have been following and reporting and investigating crimes for the better part of my adult life, and it never occurred to me that is how you, as a death investigator, has to approach the scene. That every death is a murder until proven otherwise.
Yeah. And let me explain why very briefly. Is that, look, if I start out at what I think many people would view as the most complex kind of death investigation to conduct, and not just forensically, but just from a legal standpoint, if I start off at that level, assuming my working assumption is scientifically that this is the death at the hand of another, the definition of homicide, there's a high probability I am not going to miss evidence as it relates to other manners, suicide, accident, natural, undetermined. So if I start off at that level with a homicide, then I'm guaranteed to probably hit every note along the way as far as evidence collection, observations, documentation, all that stuff that we do. And in this case, I would imagine that when the cops finally made contact with Lars Nelson at the scene, they're left scratching their head, Dave.
Well, Lars Nelson calls 911, 6:30 in the morning, reports a death. And he explains to the 911 operator, they ask the general questions, is she breathing? Can you tell what's going on? And he actually does tell them, no, she is not. She's dead. And he explains that there's a gun. It's laying on the bed. It's unloaded. He took the magazine out. And there are so many things that 911 operators have to get from an information standpoint to pass along to the officers that are going to be responding to a scene. Because A, you don't know if what you're being told is the truth. You're told there's a dead body and there's gunshot. Yeah. So where's the gun? Who's got the gun? And they get those things cleared up. And so as police arrive, Joe, and this is where it always gets interesting to me now, after doing this show with you, I'm wondering what they're walking into. They've already been told, or if you believe the call, there was a suicide. So I'm going to expect, based on that, gunshot wound to the head. That's what I'm going to expect. And normally when I would say gunshot wound to the head, it's a suicide, I'm expecting one bullet to the head, one shot. But that's not what happened here, Joe. Now, as a death investigator, if you're told something like suicide, if you're told something gunshot wound to the head, and you're investigating, are you expecting to see more than one shot to the head?
No, you're not. I had a memory just now. You had mentioned this. one of the most simple cases of suicide investigation I ever worked was three guys that had gotten drunk and they used a 45 caliber semi-automatic handgun in order to play Russian roulette.
Oh, come on.
And the first guy, obviously, I don't know if he won or lost, but he's no longer with us. That's very simplistic, all right, on one level. But if you show up at a scene, and there was an old forensic pathologist that used to use this term, and I love this. I kind of hung on to it. And again, it goes back to the reporter. He would say, "Is this as advertised?" And that statement that he would make was always amazing to me. First off, it showed that he had some miles on his tires, that because he had probably been, and you get sucked in, particularly as a young investigator, young forensic pathologist early on in your career, you have to get beat up a little bit in missed cases or misdiagnoses in order to perfect your craft. And so his big thing, is this as advertised? And with Lars Nelson, when the cops arrived, Dave, she's got, and again, another, one of my, I don't know, is it a peccadillo? One of the things that I don't like is to call gunshot wounds. I don't like saying that until I can have an official diagnosis at the morgue, because defects or holes in a body they're merely that. They're holes. How can you confirm that it is in fact a gunshot wound? Just because there's a weapon there, just because you've got spent casings there, does not necessarily mean that it is a gunshot wound.
That takes us back to a story we did the other day about the manner when we were talking about the decay and you showed me a picture and it looked like a guy had been shot dead in his chair. And you were like, Dave, that's a natural death. And I'm thinking, there's no way this can be a natural death. He's playing a joke on me. So I start looking at the picture to see overlays and everything else.
Yeah.
Because then I have learned now that nothing is as it appears. And in this case,
it's not. Yeah. And if you have people that are intent on deceiving you, gee, I wonder if there's people out there like that.
No.
In this case, the police, when they're being told by Nelson, allegedly, that this is a self-inflicted gunshot wound case. Well, just at the scene, they begin to examine the victim's body, and she's got 3 defects, actually 4.
What?
3 that apparently, according to the medical examiner later on, there's 3 defects that are in fact entrance wounds. Okay. Then you've got a 4th that's an exit. Now, let me lay the groundwork here, because many times people that are bent on taking their own life, by firearm, did you know that they will test fire a weapon? Okay. They'll test fire a weapon. I've had people that have test fired weapons once and twice before they self-inflict. And so that's not uncommon to come out to a scene of a suicide and you might have multiple spent casings laying around and you have 1 hole. That's not what you're dealing with here. You got 3, what they're calling entrance wounds now, and you've got an exit through the body, which that round apparently lodged in the adjacent wall. Now, they have not, to this point, the police have not been forthcoming with the specifics as far as the forensics go, but this is what we're hearing. First off, they don't like the fact that this is a through and through gunshot wound and that the round is lodged in a wall. And the reason they don't like that is because of the position of the body, the probability of where this round would have actually wound up if she was in a particular position. So what they're saying, I think, is that the body has been staged in some way, because they're actually using the term, she was in an unnatural position.
What does that actually mean? I mean, I know what I'm thinking, but.
Well, I had a case many years ago of a hooker and her pimp that killed a little old lady and cleaned her up and redressed her. And Dave, just like in a vampire movie, after they had redressed her, they crossed her arms like you see in presentation at a funeral home. People don't die like that. I guess some people have.
Yeah.
The majority of people don't die with their arms crossed. So when you tell me that it's kind of in an unnatural position, that's odd. All right.
Huh.
I think in a simple mind, people want to go to great lengths to say, okay, well, gee whiz, what can I do in order to make this look like this is something, as my old colleague used to say, other than as advertised, and so the weapon is away from her body. It's not adjacent to her. Now, I think, am I correct, Dave, that Nelson said that he had moved the weapon and actually cleared the weapon? Is that accurate?
He did. That's what he said to the 911 dispatch office. And for someone who understands guns and has a respect for them, I can understand why an individual would do that.
Yeah.
I would not, to be honest with you. If I came upon something like that, I would be outside, as Lars Nelson was outside of the house when he calls 911. He's not inside with the body. He goes outside. Now, I would do that. I would be outside and I would describe what I had seen, but I wouldn't go back in, mainly because I don't want to mess with anything. I want you to be able to investigate. And when he's describing basically that he has taken this weapon and he's cleared it, taken the magazine out and everything else, I'm thinking, why did he get all that effort? I mean, what's the point of that? So it does kind of make things for me a little suspect, but maybe not. I don't. Like I said,
no. Hey, listen. There's another clue here. They're also saying that the blood deposition, the blood spatter, is not in what they would consider to be consistent with this kind of death if it were in fact a suicide.
Well, 3 shots to the head, Joe. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I get the practice shot, but
okay, yeah, you're right, and that's assuming that all of them are to the head. I'm assuming that they are. Because again, they haven't narrowed that down to this point. There are people, Dave, and I had one case in particular that was quite infamous, where I had a guy that shot himself with a shotgun and didn't kill himself. He blew his chin off and the tip of his nose and wandered around the house bleeding profusely, and then came back and placed the shotgun over his heart, the muzzle, and actuated the trigger with his thumb and killed himself. So it does happen where people are shot multiple times in an attempted suicide, because you get people that will pull away at the last moment. I've actually had 2 of those kind of cases where they'll kind of retract, at the last moment, anticipating the blast, or maybe they've said, this is a stupid choice that I'm making, and they just didn't get out of the way of it. And then they have to go ahead and finish themselves off if they're capable. So to say that, well, all suicides involve a single gunshot wound, it's not completely true, because you do have those cases where people are shot multiple times. Some person might try to shoot themselves in the abdomen, for instance, in an attempt, and they realize that didn't work, so they place the weapon to their head. Some people don't want to disfigure their face or their head, so you'll have these people that, and aside from being incredibly painful, if you take an abdominal round or a shot to the chest that's non-fatal, it's markedly painful, and they go ahead and pull the real and proverbial trigger and take their own life with a GSW to the head. So you cannot say empirically that there are cases out there that all cases involve a single gunshot wound. But when you've got 3, you're going to have to go a long way to sell this to me that it's something, again, other than advertised. My wife, Kimmy, has me wrapped. I rarely, if ever, tell her no for anything. All right. We're on this kind of journey together. We have fun. We have fun every single day, even in bad times. We purpose to have fun. I rarely ever tell her no. But Brother Dave, I got to tell you, If Kimmy walked up to me and said that she wanted me to do what Lars Nelson did to this victim, I think I'm shutting things down at this point. My understanding is that there's connectivity between a request on her part and how this thing wound up, according to him at this point in time.
Well, according to him, as well as her family, her mother, there was a history of, look, if you or someone you know feels like there's nothing left in life, you know, that you're going to take it out and you want to be gone, you know, that's not the end all. Don't take your own life. No, we'll have the number up and things like that. But friends, come on. This is one of those times where the family, as soon as she's gone and Lars Nelson claims it was a suicide, that we start hearing, because police right off the bat said it doesn't look like a suicide. It does not look, what he's describing and what we're seeing are two different things. So they start talking to family members and find out that there had been a number of calls reaching out for help. And her mother described talking to her for 6 hours on the phone one day and calling and asking police to do a welfare check the next day on Sophie Tinney. And, you know, Sophie Tinney was very public, 27 years old, and she's very public about her feelings about being a really charged up vegan. And is it natalist? Is that how you say that term, Joe? Natalist?
Natalist, as in natal, like baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
don't want any baby.
Anti-natalism. Yeah.
And so it's really out there that she was very aggressive in this mental health issue. But her mother said she could get Lars Nelson to do anything. Anything she wanted, Lars Nelson would do anything to make her happy. And that is a pretty powerful statement coming from a mother about her daughter when her daughter is dead. And the suspect here, you know, is the boyfriend. And to me, that was very powerful to me because as a parent, I know how I would feel about my children, you know, and I know what you and I have seen over the years in dealing with family members who have a loved one that is gone. Nobody wants to accept suicide as a end result. And yet we have the family saying, well, you know, she had a lot of odd ideas and she had some serious mental health issues. And there was a record of these things. And anyway, Lars Nelson, you mentioned how Kimmy, can you rarely tell her no? Well, Lars Nelson never told Sophie no, apparently. And according to family and friends, he would have done this. And there was a suggestion that maybe they had a pact, that Sophie and Lars had a pact of murder-suicide. You know, I'll kill myself, you kill yourself kind of thing. And that maybe that's what happened, that Lars, you know, took her out first and was supposed to take himself out and didn't. I don't know if that's the case. It's just something that's being thrown out there as a possibility.
Yeah, and it does happen. It's I think, you know, murder suicides happen with great frequency. But do you ever notice something, Dave? And if it's not somebody, it's the same way as suicides. If they're not famous, it only makes it through maybe you know, one or two cycles. Even these tragic cases where a parent will kill all of their kids and then kill themselves, and we're talking about a mass homicide, right, coupled with a suicide. It only make it through like one or two news cycles, right, and then it's gone.
This one is different because
this is completely different because look, from everything we're hearing, this is not a suicide.
Right.
And
hey, can I add one quick thing, Joe? There was a comment here that the victim's parents, we're talking about Sophie Tinney's parents, told deputies that she and Nelson, Sophie Tinney and Lars Nelson, were, quote, codependent, and that she had a history of mental illness, suicidal ideation. The woman's mother said that she had spent 6 hours on the phone with her daughter the Friday before all this happened. And the woman allegedly said Nelson would help end her suffering. This is what mom told deputies. And that's where the deputies came up with the idea that it's possible that he did help her. He assisted in taking her own life, That's where that's coming from. I don't want you to think I made that up. It wasn't a thought I had. It actually came from discussions between the mom and the actual deputies. But Joe, this ideation of, that it's immoral to have a child because of all the pain and suffering that exists in the world today. And it wasn't something just shared by Sophie Tinney. There are other people who believe that and talk openly about it. The internet is a crazy place for crazy things to be said out loud. And these were things said out loud. And Sophie Tinney's death occurs, April 20th, right?
Yes.
And a couple of weeks later in Palm Springs, California, there is a bomb that goes off at an IVF clinic, a fertility clinic in Palm Springs.
Yeah.
And the guy who did it was trying to live stream this bombing. Did you know that?
Yeah.
He failed at the live stream, but he was trying to live stream blowing up a building.
Yeah. And he succeeded. There were people hurt. The facing of this building gets taken out. And he used ammonium nitrate, which is very similar to the fertilizer bomb that Timothy McVeigh used. And when you see this thing, I encourage anybody, that is not familiar with the case involving Guy Bartkus, in Palm Springs, to go take a look at the images here and see what this looks like. But he had left behind a manifesto. And again, this happened a month after Lars Nelson has allegedly killed Sophie. And what's so fascinating, Dave, is that in the manifesto that Bartkus wrote prior to, him vaporizing himself and injuring other people at the IVF clinic, she's mentioned in it, or at least they believe. He alludes to this idea that there is this couple up in Washington State where they were anti-natalist. He used another term in addition to anti-natalism. Let's see if I can recall what it was, but there are other terms that this guy has utilized, and this kind of underlying, I don't know what it is, a code that they're living by now. And he stated that he wanted an end to essentially the potential for new life. Just let that sink in for a moment. It's one thing, if you want to vaporize yourself and, but it's not just a matter of taking your own life or injuring these people at this clinic. You're making a statement here about, because, they've got like frozen embryos in this place. This is a place where couples that are childless go for hope. I mean, how many people have you and I encountered in our life that can't get pregnant? And it's heartbreaking because these people will be really good parents, and it just doesn't happen for them. And this idea that they're trying to, and I think that this is where he's coming from, I don't know, they're trying to engineer science, and that shouldn't happen. And his other term for this, Dave, I love how these things are kind of manufactured out of thin air. Pro-mortalism is his term. And the underlying view on the part of Bartkus that wrote the manifesto is that death is better than life.
Right.
So the mortality as opposed to immortality, the peace that comes along with self-inflicting and ending your life is far better than existing in the world in which you currently find yourself inhabiting. And it's a desperately dangerous view in my view, at least, because you've got so many people that are that perceive themselves to be so fragile out there, and that you have a construct that's floating around out there where people can get a hold of this. One of my biggest worries about this case, and I really hope that the feds are looking into this, were any of these people networked with one another that extends out further than just them. Because It's one thing to have a boyfriend who is easily influenced. You've got this issue of quote unquote codependency, and he takes the life of his lover. All right. It's something completely different when you talk about a guy that gets his hands on ammonium nitrate. By the way, the guy that supplied him with it was hiding in Europe. They had to go arrest him. I think they arrested him in Poland.
Wow.
And that gave this fellow, the ammonium nitrate.
Wow.
How far out do the tentacles of this thing stretch, Dave?
Wow.
It's really dangerous when you think about it. Are there other people out there that, look, I don't care about myself. I don't care about my fellow humans surrounding me. I don't care about my family. I'm going to try to take out as many people as I possibly can in one fell swoop. And I think that's the real tragedy here.
One of the things I did was I wrote down the motivation. And I know that the motivation for a crime is not, I guess it's not important in black and white. It's important to me because I kind of like to know why somebody did something. And in this particular case, I feel like we have to know why, because I believe this could be the start of something that is just going to escalate, because there are so many people whose entire lives are built to a very small world. It's a big world, but sitting in the palm of your hand. And that if you're negative, you can feed negativity. You can find more people. A lot of times we feel like we are kind of all alone in our thoughts, but now you're all alone in your thoughts. But there's millions of other people around the world that are alone in their thoughts, and they're going to help you isolate even more and reinforce your belief that somehow this pro-mortalist ideology, arguing that life, and I wrote this down because I'm really having trouble with this, Joe. Life should be ended as soon as possible because it only results in suffering and death. The belief that having children is unethical. It only exposes more people to future suffering and death. That's the motivation for trying to blow up a fertility clinic. That's the motivation for getting your boyfriend to enter into a murder-suicide pact. I mean, Joe, this is a dangerous,
it's very
dangerous ideology.
Yeah, it's markedly dangerous, Dave. And, it's one thing to talk or maybe write about these things, but to now, you have interjected action into the national conversation. You have demonstrated that the possibility exists that you can move forward with your thoughts about life, even if it means taking the lives of others. My friends, listen, if you or anybody, I'm begging, I'm pleading with you, has any kind of suicidal thoughts, they're having trouble in their life, you suspect that there is a problem, or maybe you are struggling right now, I urge you with all that is within me to please reach out. There's help. And the national helpline for crises, particularly as it applies to suicide, is simply 3 numbers. Are you ready? 988. There are people on duty that can talk to you and that can get you help and that will just listen. But please don't sit there in isolation. Reach out if you're troubled. 988. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.